My wife called me from her car while I was standing on a job site in 90-degree Texas heat. The settlement finally cleared, she said, and her voice had something in it I'd never heard in 24 years of marriage. Not excitement, not relief. Victory. $2.1 million, Marcus. I want a divorce. Have your things out of the house by 7. I stood there with my phone in my hand, watching my crew work on a commercial HVAC retrofit 3 stories up, and felt something strange settle over me. Not panic. Not the crushing devastation she'd probably been imagining. Something closer to recognition, like a puzzle piece clicking into place after years of wondering where it fit. I'll be there by 6, I said. She hung up without answering. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 49 years old. And I've spent the last 22 years building Webb plumbing and HVAC from a 2-truck operation out of my garage in San Antonio into a company with 31 employees and contracts with 3 school districts and a regional hospital. I know how to read a blueprint in bad light. I know how to diagnose a failing system before it fails completely. I wish I'd been half as observant when it came to my marriage. What Sandra didn't know was that her father had called me 6 weeks earlier. Gerald Marsh had been in hospice for 11 days when he picked up the phone and dialed my cell. His voice was thin and rough, but his mind was sharp. The way old men's minds get when they know their time is running out and they're done wasting words. Marcus, he said, I need to tell you something about Sandra and that settlement money. When it clears, she's going to move. I've already talked to my attorney. There are protections in place for you that she doesn't know about. He paused to cough. Document everything between now and then. Every transaction. Every text. Don't trust the joint accounts. He paused again, longer this time. I'm sorry I didn't say this sooner. I kept hoping I was wrong about her. I'd asked him what he meant, and he said, You've been more of a son to me than anyone in that family. I won't let her take what you built. He died 9 days later. So when Sandra's call came through, I wasn't blindsided. I was ready. I told my foreman, Ray, that I had a family situation and left the site at 4:30. The drive back to our house in Stone Oak took 25 minutes, and I used every one of them going through the mental checklist I'd been building since Gerald's call. Documents, bank records, passwords, the safety deposit box at Frost Bank with copies of everything I'd already started gathering. Sandra was waiting in the living room when I walked in, dressed like she was heading to a closing on a property she'd already bought. There was a folder on the coffee table, papers fanned out the way someone arranges them when they want to look prepared. 2 glasses on the table, but only one had been used. The detail registered without me naming it. The papers are already drawn up, she said. I'd like this to be simple. I picked up the folder and went through it page by page. No court filing stamp. No case number on the divorce petition. Her attorney's letterhead looked right, but the separation agreement had language that would have waived my interest in the business without explicitly saying so. I've signed enough contracts over the years to know when language is doing something it doesn't appear to be doing. I signed where she indicated. Then I used my phone to photograph every page, front and back, while she watched. What are you doing? She asked. Being careful, I said. I went to our bedroom and packed what I actually needed. Medical documents, both laptops, the external hard drive from my desk drawer, medications, 3 changes of clothes. When I came back through the living room, Sandra was texting with her phone tilted away from me. I stopped at the door. She was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before, or maybe I had and called it something else. Certainty. The absolute confidence of someone who believes they've already won. Take care of yourself, Sandra, I said. Then I walked out. I checked into a Marriott off Highway 281. The kind of place with cameras at every entrance and a front desk that logs the exact time you arrive. I requested a room facing the parking lot for a reason I couldn't have explained except that it felt correct. The room was quiet and anonymous and exactly what I needed. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint checking account. I'd been looking at these records for 6 weeks by then, building a picture 1 transaction at a time, but I went through it all again from the beginning, going back 7 years. The pattern was the same each time I looked at it. Small transfers, ranging from $300 to $2,200, always routed to an account I'd traced to her mother's name. The first one was dated a month after our younger child, Kayla, started college, and Sandra had more time at home alone. I opened the spreadsheet I'd been keeping. Over 6 years and 4 months, Sandra had transferred $187,000 out of our joint accounts. I sat with that number for a while. $187,000. More than the first house we'd owned together. Then I found the other thing, an email notification buried in a folder Sandra used to handle household bills, forwarded to a secondary address I discovered through our shared cloud backup. It was from our insurance carrier, a request submitted 5 days before her phone call today, asking to remove Marcus Webb from the family health plan effective immediately, citing voluntary separation. I have hypertension. I've managed it for 11 years with 2 medications that cost me over $600 a month without coverage. Sandra had been sitting across from me at the dinner table every time I refilled those prescriptions. She'd been at 3 cardiology follow-ups. She knew exactly what losing that insurance would mean. The request hadn't been processed yet. I had a window. I called my insurance agent at 7 the next morning and explained the situation. She put a hold on any changes to the policy pending documentation of actual legal separation. Then I called Dan Reeves, the attorney I'd used when I incorporated the business 16 years ago. I'd already sent him everything the night before. He replied before 8. Can meet at 9. This is serious. Come with everything you have. Dan's office was downtown, 4th floor, overlooking the Riverwalk. He'd been practicing family and business law for 28 years, and his face told you nothing while his eyes took in everything. I spent 40 minutes walking him through it. The call. The papers, the $187,000, the insurance cancellation. Gerald's call from hospice 6 weeks ago. Dan leaned back when I finished. Gerald Marsh, he said. His estate hearing is tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock, Bexar County Probate. You've been listed as a required attendee. I stared at him. Me? By name, Dan said, in a specific addendum filed by Gerald's attorney 2 days before he died. Sandra was already in the hallway when Dan and I arrived at the probate office the next morning. She was standing with a man I didn't recognize in a very expensive suit. When she saw me, the composure on her face cracked for just a second before she reassembled it. "What are you doing here?" she said. "I was summoned," I said. The hearing room was a long conference table, fluorescent lights, a county probate officer named Mr. Tran Castillo with bifocals, and a manner that suggested he'd seen everything twice. He opened the case file without preamble. "The estate of Gerald Arthur Marsh," he began, "with a gross value of approximately $1.1 million, designates Sandra Marsh-Lane as primary heir." He looked up briefly in her direction. Her attorney smiled. "However, the will contains a series of specific provisions filed under a sealed addendum dated 6 weeks prior to the decedent's death." He turned a page. "Mr. Rana, Marcus Webb is designated as compliance trustee for a period of 24 months, with specific authority to review and flag any transactions related to estate assets during that period." He read another paragraph. "Additionally, a separate private account not previously disclosed to family members, held at Frost Bank under sole ownership of the decedent, has been designated in full to Marcus Webb. Current balance is $382,000. Sandra's attorney put his hand on the table. "Objection. This is a probate hearing, Counselor," Mr. Castillo said, not looking up. "There's nothing to object to. These are the instructions of the deceased." Sandra's face had gone a color I'd never seen on it before. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Text from a number I didn't recognize. "Webb, this is Melissa Park from Summit Realty. Your wife listed your property at 1140 Ridgecrest for sale yesterday afternoon. A buyer has submitted a $40,000 earnest money deposit and is requesting a signed contract today. Please call me." I showed the phone to Dan under the table. He stood immediately. "Mr. Castillo, I need to flag an unauthorized real estate transaction." The hearing was suspended while Dan got on the phone with the title company. Sandra had listed the house the same day she told me to leave, using a power of attorney document she'd notarized 3 months earlier. The buyer had already wired the deposit. We drove to Summit Realty directly from the probate office. The buyer was waiting in a conference room, a commercial developer from Houston named Preston Gates, who was visibly unhappy. Dan laid out the situation in 12 minutes. Joint marital property. No court-authorized separation. The power of attorney document itself had procedural errors that made it unenforceable. Preston Gates looked at Melissa Park, who looked at her desk. "I want my deposit back within 48 hours, Preston said, and walked out. That evening, Tyler called. My son was 26 and his final year at UT Health San Antonio, 2 semesters from his DDS. His voice was tight in a way I recognized from when he was a teenager, trying not to show that something had rattled him. "Dad, Mom told me you walked out." She said there were problems with the business and you'd been hiding money from her. He paused. I told her I needed to hear your side. She got angry. I said carefully, there are two sides to everything. But right now I need you to just know that whatever happens between your mother and me doesn't change what's between you and me. That's fixed. Dad, Tyler said. I recorded the conversation she and I had this afternoon. I want to send it to you. My chest tightened. Tyler, I need you to hear it, he said. Please. The file came through while we were still on the phone. I put him on speaker and opened it. I heard my son's voice first. Steady and careful, Mom. I need to understand what happened. Dad seems different from what you're describing. Sandra's voice came back sharp and certain. Your father has always been comfortable with mediocrity, Tyler. He built a nice little company and thought that was enough. I spent 24 years managing his household and supporting his business, and I am not going to spend the rest of my life shrinking myself to fit his limitations. But you seemed happy, Tyler said. Sandra laughed. It was not a warm sound. Seemed is the right word. I've been with someone else for 5 years, sweetheart. Someone who actually challenges me. Your father never suspected because he trusted me completely. He was too busy being reliable. A long pause. Does Kayla know? Tyler asked. Kayla will come around, Sandra said, once she understands the financial reality. She's still got 2 years of nursing school. She'll need support. I control that support now. And if she doesn't come around, then that's her choice and its consequences, Sandra said. The recording continued, but I'd heard enough. I stopped it and sat on the edge of the hotel bed with the phone in my hand for a long time. Tyler's voice came through small and steady. Dad, I'm on your side. I need you to know that. I said, you don't have to choose. I already did, he said. You don't have to choose. I already did, he said. The moment she said Kayla's tuition was leverage. The next morning, Dan called me before I'd finished my coffee. Sandra filed for an emergency protective order last night. She's alleging threatening behavior and says she's in fear for her safety. I set the cup down. I haven't been within 2 miles of her since Monday evening. I know, Dan said. The hearing's at 2. Bring everything. The courtroom was small and overlit. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Judge Harriet Voss, whose expression during Sandra's attorney's opening statement suggested she'd heard this particular type of filing more times than she found acceptable. Sandra sat at the plaintiff's table looking composed and appropriately distressed, a performance assembled with care. When Dan stood, he placed a single stack of documents on the podium. Your Honor, Mr. Webb has resided continuously at the Marriott on 2881 since the evening of Monday the 12th. He has not visited, called, or attempted to contact Mrs. Webb except through legal representation. We have hotel keycard records with timestamps, security footage logs provided by the hotel's own system, and credit card records placing him at 3 separate locations during the specific date cited in the filing. Judge Voss studied the pages. Then she looked up at Sandra's attorney. Counsel, she said, the dates your client has identified as incidents fall entirely within the period your opposing party has verifiable documentation showing his continuous presence elsewhere. She set the papers down deliberately. This order is denied. I'm entering a notation in the record regarding the nature of this filing. She looked at Sandra directly. I would strongly caution against using this court's resources in this manner a second time. Sandra stared at the table. I didn't feel satisfaction walking out. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. That night there was a manila envelope waiting for me at Dan's office. Gerald's personal attorney had messengered it over, marked for my attention with Gerald's handwriting on the front. Inside were 12 letters. I opened them in order by date. The first was from 8 years ago. Marcus, I saw Sandra having lunch with a man last Thursday at the Westin downtown. They were not behaving like colleagues. I don't know what to do with this. I thought you should know. I'm sorry. I couldn't bring myself to call you. I will keep watching. Doppery? The second was from 6 years ago. I saw him again. His name is Brad Keller. He runs a personal training studio off Loop 1604. I've confirmed this is ongoing. I can't tell you. I've tried 3 times and I can't do it. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm documenting everything. G. The letters continued at intervals. Gerald had watched his own daughter's affair for 8 years, collecting names, dates, the name of the studio, once even a photograph he printed and tucked inside an envelope. He had written the word sorry in almost every letter. The last one was dated 2 weeks before he died. Marcus. Sandra came to the hospital yesterday with papers. She told the nurse it was estate planning, but she wanted me to sign something that would have removed you from my private account and transferred oversight of my assets to Craig. Craig was Sandra's brother. I refused. The nurse documented the visit. I've changed my will for the final time. The private account is yours outright. The compliance trusteeship is yours. These are the only things I can still do for you. I should have called you 8 years ago. I was a coward who loved his daughter too much and his son-in-law not enough until it was almost too late. Forgive me if you can. Whatever you decide about what I've written here, please know you were always the son I should have had. Gerald. I sat in Dan's empty conference room for a long time after I finished reading. Dan knocked twice and opened the door. There's one more thing in the envelope. It was a folded copy of a financial record from 6 years ago. A wire transfer, $120,000. Moved from a joint investment account Sandra and I had held at the time into a sole ownership account in Sandra's name. It had happened the same week I was in Houston for a week-long commercial contract job, the kind of week where I barely checked my personal phone. Gerald had circled the date and written in the margin, she thought this one was invisible. D. I added it to the folder. The next morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. A woman named Patricia Holden from Vertex Climate Systems, a national HVAC and building systems corporation headquartered in Dallas. She said her company had been watching Webb Plumbing's commercial contract record for 2 years and wanted to discuss bringing me in as their regional director of operations for Texas and Oklahoma. Base salary of $192,000 a year, full benefits, equity package at 2 years. I'd been in quiet conversations with Vertex for 6 weeks. I hadn't mentioned it to Sandra. At the time, I hadn't been sure why. Now I understood perfectly. I'm very interested, I told Patricia Holden. Send me the formal offer. I forwarded it to Dan before I even replied to Patricia. Perfect timing, Dan said when I called him. Post-separation income. She has zero claim on it. 2 weeks later, we sat across from Sandra's legal team in a conference room at Dan's office. Dan laid out everything on the table in the order we'd assembled it. The bank records showing $187,000 in systematic transfers, the insurance cancellation attempt, the unauthorized property listing, the failed protective order, Gerald's 12 letters, the private account transfer from 6 years ago, and a recording Tyler had made. Sandra's attorney asked for 20 minutes in the hallway with his client. They came back in 17. The settlement that followed took 4 days to finalize. Sandra received a full $2.1 million lawsuit settlement, minus federal taxes, and the $65,000 in personal loans she'd taken from friends against the anticipated payout, leaving her with approximately $1.4 million in actual liquid assets. She returned $150,000 of the $187,000 taken from the joint accounts, reduced from the full amount in exchange for not pursuing criminal fraud charges. I received the house and refinanced it in my name alone, the business completely free, and Gerald's private account of $382,000 outright. Sandra's relationship with Brad Keller ended, according to her sister who mentioned it to Tyler without intending to, approximately 6 weeks after the settlement closed. The money had apparently been more central to his interest than he'd let on. I didn't feel anything when I heard that, not satisfaction, not vindication. She had become someone I used to know, a person whose choices had led her exactly where they were always going to lead her. The house sold in 11 days. I didn't take much with me. Most of it was furniture we'd chosen together, and none of it felt like mine anymore. Kayla called me on the drive to Dallas with my truck loaded and a trailer on the back. Dad, she said. I confronted her last week. I need you to know what she said. I'd heard the gist of it from Tyler already, but I let Kayla tell me in her own words, because she needed to. She said you were never ambitious enough. She said she'd spent 20 years waiting for you to become something more. Kayla's voice was steady and precise, the same way it got when she was explaining a medical process she'd learned in class. I told her you built a company from nothing that employed 30 people and kept our family stable and put both of us through school. And she said, that's exactly what I mean. I drove for a mile before I said anything. She wasn't wrong that I was comfortable, I said finally. I liked what I had. I thought she did too. She was wrong about everything that mattered, Kayla said. Don't do that, Dad. Don't make it your fault. My Dallas apartment was on the 14th floor, a clean, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows looking northwest toward where the city opened up into plains that rolled out flat and wide all the way to the horizon. I stood at that window the first night with a glass of water and watched the lights and felt something I hadn't expected, Not grief. Not relief, exactly. Something quieter. The sense of arriving somewhere after a very long drive. Tyler had deferred a semester from his dental program to spend 3 weeks helping me settle in. He slept on the couch for 2 of them and put up my bookshelves and learned Dallas traffic patterns with me. Kayla flew in the first weekend and spent 2 days insisting on the layout of the kitchen. The 4 of us, Dan, had driven up for dinner, his wife and Toit around my new dining table on a Saturday night 6 weeks after the settlement closed. Kayla had made her grandmother's recipe for something I hadn't tasted since I was a guest at Gerald's house the first time Sandra brought me home, 27 years ago. At some point, Tyler set his fork down and looked at me. "I want to say something," he said. "I've been thinking about it for a while." He looked at his hands briefly, then back at me. "What she did to you could have broken you. I watched it happen in real time and I kept waiting for you to get mean or fall apart, or do something that matched what she was doing. And you never did. You just kept being who you are." He paused. "I'm going to be a father someday, I hope. And when I am, I want to be the kind of father who shows his kids what it looks like to walk through something terrible and come out decent on the other side. You showed me that. That's not nothing, Dad." Kayla reached across the table and took my hand without saying anything. Dan raised his glass. "To a man who won without throwing a single dirty punch." I looked at my 2 children across the table, at Dan and his wife, at the Dallas skyline through the window behind them. None of this had been what I planned. The marriage I thought I had, the stability I'd built those 24 years, the version of the future I'd been working toward. All of it had been something different underneath, a structure built on someone else's concealed intentions. But Tyler was here. Kayla was here. I had a career that pushed me somewhere I hadn't expected to go. I had Gerald's final gift sitting in an account with my name on it. The last act of a man who'd watched and waited too long and then did everything he could before he ran out of time. "I didn't do anything heroic," I said. "I just refused to become what she needed me to become to justify what she was doing. I refused to get ugly. I refused to stop being who I am. And I held on to the 2 things that were always real." I looked at Tyler, then at Kayla. "You 2? That's it. That's the whole list." We sat at the table for another 2 hours. Nobody was in a hurry to be anywhere else. Later, after Tyler and Kayla had argued over who was washing the dishes and Dan and his wife had driven back to their hotel, I stood at the window again. The plains were dark past the edge of the city lights, a long, flat darkness that went on and on. I thought about Gerald, about the 12 letters he'd written and never sent, and the last thing he'd found, the energy to do with the time he had left. I thought about the fact that I'd never thanked him, and that I never would be able to, and I let that sit with me without trying to move it anywhere. Sandra had tried to use a windfall to rewrite the last 24 years, to make them something she'd survived and finally escaped. The truth was simpler and less dramatic. She'd had a life that worked and a husband who loved her, and she'd wanted a different story so badly she'd been willing to burn down the real one to get it. I didn't wish her anything bad. I didn't wish her anything at all. I had 31 employees in San Antonio still putting in good work under a foreman I trusted. I had a new role that challenged me in ways the shop never had. I had a daughter who would finish nursing school in 18 months and a son who would have his own practice before he was 30. I had Gerald's account and Gerald's letters, and the memory of an old man calling me from hospice to tell me I mattered to him. I had my own name clean. That turned out to be more than enough.